Hello and welcome to Dan's Model Works, and today we are on part 3 of our 2Ts by AMT build. And if you haven't seen the previous episodes, this is going to be the stock Model T pickup truck, and this is going to be our Model T hot rod. And this AMT kit that we're using, it gives you enough parts to build 2 complete cars. I just thought I'd recap some of the extra parts that we have, mainly because I expressed a little bit of confusion earlier on about some of these extra parts. One of them was we seem to have an extra floorboard here. We have this seat, and then we have this seat, and basically that's just that's explained by the different variations you can build. If you're doing a very fancy hot rod, this is the interior you'd be using, and it has a complete floor. If you were doing a hot rod with a little bit less interior appointments, you'd be using the stock Model T seat, and of course it has a fuel tank underneath it. You'd need a floor, and that's where this part comes into play. As well, this is the floorboard you would use if you were doing the fruit wagon hot rod, because you'd still need a floorboard. You wouldn't be using the floorboard and the fenders from the stock Model T. Confused? I am. No. I've pretty much figured out what parts I've got to use for which vehicle. As we plod on, one of the first things I'm going to do in this part is I'm going to be working on the wheels, just so that I can get these to the point where they're rolling chassis. And one of the reasons I want to do that, and once again, the hot rod seems to be taking more of our attention, is I want to do this as a mild hot rod, as I believe I've already said, more of a cruiser. So I'm not planning on using, if I can find them, there we go. I'm not planning on using the giant racing slicks. But that's okay, because AMT gives you 4 of these tires. But what I want to do is I want to be able to mock up the chassis with the regular tires front and back, just so I can see how it sits. Do I need to adjust how it sits? Is it going to be too low in the back with slightly smaller tires? I'm going to basically put together the front wheels, and I'm going to just mock them up on the side, okay? Because even though they give you 4 sets of wheels, or 4 sets of tires, in order to mount them on the wheels, if we look at this part, these are for the front wheels, these are for the drag slicks. So they're going to have to be filed down. So that's where we're at. So here we have the wheels for the Classic T. Now, I think I'm going to be really, really original and paint them red. No! Yes. For some reason or other, you think Model T, you think the wheels are going to be painted. Well, I mean, they could be painted brown. They could be just a natural brown color, because they were made out of wood. But so oftentimes they're red, and that's what's popping into my head, that they should be painted red, so that's what's going to happen. I would like to airbrush these red, mainly to just give a little bit better finish. So I'm thinking if I can clean these up while they're still on the sprue, then I've got something to hold them while I airbrush. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to clean up any sinkholes, any ejection pin marks, and any flash while they're on the sprue. If I'm successful, that'll make painting it just that much more easy. Alright, these probably don't look much different on camera, but they have been cleaned up. On the back sides, each wheel has 4 ejector pin marks. Now, you could probably fill them and sand them, but I'm thinking since they're the inside of the wheels, there's fenders going to be on them and everything like that, I'm not going to worry too much about them. I did make sure that, any flash or anything around those ejector pin marks was sliced off. One of the rear wheels looks like there was a little bit of misalignment in the spokes, but I cleaned that up okay. So the next stop for this part is going to be the paint booth to get a nice coat of red paint put on them. As well, in order to evaluate the stance that the car is going to take, I'm going to have to start on the body of the hot rod. I've decided to use the original, as they call it, the turtle deck. So that will go onto the back of the coupe. And so I've got to go over the body and make sure that I get rid of all the seam lines and things like that. There's a doozy of a line right here. You can probably see it on the camera if I focus in. That'll have to be sanded down. There's another one here These ones are fairly minor. They should come out without too many problems. Here we are after we've sanded those seam lines. So now we're ready to put the turtle back on. Now we can get some idea of what the body's going to look like. I'm also going to make sure that I get the firewall in place here, mainly because I want to see how that's going to go against the engine, make sure I don't have any fit issues there. I just want to say a word about the firewalls, because if you look at the instructions, well, number one, it's not clear as to which part is which by the part numbers. Focus in on here. I said focus. In the pictures of the instructions, the firewall for the hot rod seems to have a lot more detail on it. You can see this one here is quite plain. However, the way to tell the difference is the Classic T has a hole in the firewall for the steering column to go through, whereas the hot rod, I believe the steering gear goes straight down, and it does not have that hole. This is for the hot rod. This one is for the Classic T. Now, as well, the fit is not really brilliant. You can see the gap there. So I'm going to be gluing this on, and then I'm going to be using some filler, and I'm going to sand it all down and get a nice smooth fit onto here. I've got my front wheels together. Just a word of caution, make sure you don't have a little bit of glue on your fingertips, because it will mark the white wall detail there. At least I know I can touch that up. These wheels are now ready for the purpose I have in mind, which is just to establish the stance of the car and see if I'm going to be happy with using 4 of these versus the slicks. Regarding the fit of the body, the tub I'm pretty sure we want to have sitting down flat on the frame like this. With the inside of the body in place, when I put it on the frame, you can see the back end doesn't quite want to go down all the way like it should, which keeps the body from sitting down on the sides of the frame. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of thinning on the turtle deck back here to get that to sit down flat. Probably see I've already puttied here and done a little bit of sanding. There's a couple spots that I need to sand again, and then hopefully we can get this ready for paint. Alright, I've scraped the inside of the turtle back here, and as you can see, the body is sitting much lower on the frame, pretty much the way it should be. And if we look underneath, we can see that the floor is almost hard up against the frame, so that's where we want that to be. A little bit of a fit issue there. I think it might be because the turtle deck, they're probably thinking you're going to use it with Classic T more than you will with the hot rod. So here I've mocked up those front wheels, front and back, just so that I can see what the stance is going to be like if I use the regular street tires all the way around. Is it looking like it's dragging its ass or anything like that? It doesn't look too bad. So I think I'm going to go ahead and modify the wheel backs for the slicks so that I can use the regular street tires all the way around. It doesn't look like I'm going to really have to do anything to the frame to adjust the height of the wheels. That's a little bit of a relief right there. I've done just a little bit more scraping, and you can see that the turtle deck now completely hides the frame, and the body really sits as low as it should. And if we look inside, you can see there's a little bit of a discrepancy between where the gear shift mounts onto the transmission, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. It's not like we're actually going to be putting this thing in gear. Curiously, if you look underneath, the turtleneck ends up coming down so low that the suspension actually goes up in that space. So really, the turtleneck is just there for ornamentation on the hot rod, but I still think it looks pretty good. One of the things I will be doing with this is I will be using the fenders that they give you. It was one of the reasons I wanted to use the street tires. I think it'll look interesting with the fenders on them, kind of like the modern day Prowler. Now here are the street tires mocked up onto the wheels for the slicks. You can see that in terms of filling the wheel cavity, it works quite well. But the wheel back sticks out considerably. I will have to grind this down until it's the right thickness, so I'll just do that via trial and error. So in order to thin down these parts, I'm just basically putting on a piece of sandpaper. And it takes maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, but eventually you wear it all down evenly, and then you can put back on the wheel. There you can see we're about 2/3 of the way there. A little bit more sanding to go, and we'll have it. There we go. It's all thinned out. Seems to fit pretty good. By comparison, that's how big the part was originally. So all I had to do is this one. We're continuing to make decisions regarding the hot rod. Front wheels have been mounted on the axle, though not glued. They're actually loose fit on that metal axle. So if we move towards the back, look straight down, the track that looked fine when it had drag slicks on it certainly looks a little too wide and spider-like with the street tires on it. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to narrow the track a bit, and that shouldn't be too difficult because, crash bang, I have some of the wheel back I can remove here. So just to compare the track of the front wheels are 35 agates across. Now we'll measure the back wheels, and the track here is 40 agates. So we've got a 5 agate difference between the front and the rear wheel track. So if I take at least an agate and a half off of each wheel backs here, we should be able to bring that closer and make the chassis look a little bit better. I've shortened that boss that comes off the back of the wheels. So let's see what that's done to our rear wheel track here. We'll just put the body back on and we'll see how that looks. So here's the body on with the rear track adjusted. And I think, yeah, that's the look I was looking for. That'll look good once we get the separate fenders hooked onto it. And look what we got back from the paint booth. Wheels for the Classic T. Alright. Continuing to make progress on it. Alright. That's what I'm talking about. That looks sharp. Just what you want to see. Now I'm going to lightly sand the tread just to get rid of the mold line that you can see on there. And probably do a couple, probably these little nuts here, I'll pick those out in silver. Now in order to get the seam line off of any molded vinyl tire, all you have to do is just put down a piece of sandpaper like this, and using a bit of as if you were rolling it forward but pulling it backwards, just gently go on some sandpaper. It doesn't have to be super coarse. There you go. You can see it's scuffed up and we've gotten rid of most of the mold line. I mean, even a car that is in a museum that's had its wheels shined up, won't have a line molded down the middle of it. Hey look, we've got rolling chassis going on here. Of course, these wheels are not actually glued on the axles yet. But it's nice to know that we have definitely made some progress. Geez, it'd almost be hard-pressed to know these came from the same vehicle, or had their origins in the same vehicle. So we're finally starting work on the classic Model T pickup truck cab. So there's going to be a padded seat that goes on top of here. I won't actually put that in until I've airbrushed all the body work. There were some nasty ejector pin marks here and here, but they were outies, so I was able to sand those down without too much problems. Unfortunately, on the sides, there's 3 nasty ejector pin marks on each side, and unfortunately those are innies. They're actually indented, so actually they're kind of half innies and half outies. So I'm going to have to sand off what sits proud, and then I'm going to have to fill that. Here are the cab walls with the putty in place. I'll sand those down once they dry, and hopefully I won't have to do too much reputtying. Just noticed something curious about the roof. It has these 2 lumps here in the corners, and they actually do appear on the drawing in the instructions as well. I think I'm going to restrain from chiseling them off until I know whether or not they actually serve some sort of purpose, because if the cab actually tapers in a bit, they might be serving a purpose here. I will clean up these sink marks on the roof though. Now I have a bit of a question as to the fit of the firewall here. As you can see, it doesn't completely fill the space. But on the other hand, it doesn't fit in here flush very well either. Now if I take the hood and I set it inside the hood, it does fit pretty good in here. So I think I'm going to install it in the cowl in such a way that it does sit slightly proud, and then that way it can help the hood stay in place. It's my best guess. There is a little bit of a lip right here, and the potential for a lip here and here. So I did a little bit of filing to accentuate that in order to get it to seat in here a little bit better. Alright, here we are at the spray booth, and I'm going to be painting the hot rod Tamiya Coral Blue. I just was looking for basically a rattle can I can use on this project, and I like the color. I haven't really had anything else that's painted, a light blue like that yet. That's what I've decided to go with. And I was really impressed with the Tamiya clear gloss, so I'm going to try one of their solid colors. Here we can see that the basic body for the hot rod has been painted, and like it looks pretty good. Now I'm just starting to do some work here on the classic tees floorboards and running boards, and of course the fenders. And if you look at this side here, this is the fender as AMT gives it to you. And if we look at the very end of the fender, trying to focus in, it does get quite thin. The temptation might be, oh, that's flash, let's cut that off. That's not flash, that's how thick it should be. So the fenders are actually quite a bit over thick. If we flip around to this side, you can see this fender looks a lot thinner. And what I've done is I've basically scraped the inside of the fender coming to the edge. Now you're not going to quite come to a full point, and you're never going to thin the entire fender out. But the interesting thing is if you manage to thin just the edge and feather it back, the eye will think the entire fender is that thin. So I've got 3 more fenders to thin out here. Alright, both of the rear fenders have now been thinned out. The front fenders still need to be thinned. But we're pretty much looking at the end of part 3 of our 2Ts by AMT. I've just mocked up the bodies, or as much of the bodies as will stand up on their own here. And hopefully in part 4 we can get these completed, or if not completed, darn close. Because I don't like these projects to go on for too many parts, at least not something simple like a car build. So until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling.